Hey everybody, welcome to Paranormal Karen bonus episode about QAnon. So, this episode may be choppy and it may be a little disoriented. And the reason is because I found someone, he's a friend of mine, and he, shall we say, he's not part of QAnon, but he is adjacent and has been, so he knows the people, shall I say, where the rest of us would be picking up stuff from the internet. He is closer or somewhat, I wouldn't say somewhat involved, but let's just say this is the best source I think anybody could find for QAnon that wasn't exactly QAnon. And I don't want to put his voice over, so we did an hour interview, and I am literally going to listen to what we said and then turn on this and try and get it to you with the most amount of semblance that I can. So I'm going to be stopping and starting this tape. So, and it's a bonus episode, so I'm trying to keep it all in one piece so I can just put it up. Now, I want to tell you a couple things. This is someone I know and I trust, and I know he's not nuts. So some of the information that you hear, you might be like, well, that's nuts. Well, I got to tell you, it's coming from and some of it, I don't even take in all of it. I definitely don't take in all of this. But the beautiful thing is he was willing to commit to a time. So I need this episode to be out before January 6th, because if anything that is true with QAnon is going to start going down, it's going to start on the 6th or sooner. So that's the good thing about this episode. If by January, if by the inauguration, this hasn't gone down, then good, and I'm crazy, and I hope I entertained you for an hour. But it was interesting enough I wanted him to tell me what is coming up and how can people be prepared, and that's what he did. So let's jump in. Also, please keep in mind, I'm just going to transcribe to you verbally what he is telling me. I was trying to keep all opinions out and just ask questions and not challenge other than, well, what do you mean by that? Or should we be ready for that? So I hope I did a good investigating job, but I did not jump in with opinions on such things as, obviously you guys know I don't like Trump. I think he's dumb. I didn't need to put that in. We're just getting the information from QAnon. Also, he talks about Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and several times both he and I said the bad faction of it. So what we are talking about when you hear us say Antifa or Black Lives Matter would be either the troublesome sort of fringe of that, or the people that were infiltrating and trying to make them look bad. So when we talk about the bad factions, no, that's what I'm talking about. Also, I do believe QAnon really does have a problem with Antifa. And I know Antifa is not a group, it's a faction, different little factions of people. And he knew that as well. But I think that he found, and I'm trying not to speak for him, but oftentimes you will hear him refer to Antifa. Again, either the bad factions or the part that he finds as a battle. So I'm going to keep stopping and starting and seeing as much as I can get you. So if it sounds choppy or you hear me say, I'm back, it means I had to stop and take in information. All right, let's get started. So he's able to meet with these guys, or he said to me, let's just say I was always ended up being in the right time, in the right place, with the right people, to know these people and to talk about it. Also, he has a life of a very different life than ours, which may have been military, militia, all different kinds of things going on there. So the place all of this starts is JFK. When JFK was alerted the CIA was after him, he created QAnon, not QAnon, Q Intelligence. So he started this with military people that were under him that started to investigate to sort of see how far this deep state sort of underworld, I don't know what you want to call it. We'll just call it the deep state. He just wanted to see how far deep it went. So the Q intelligence gathering was trying to figure out what was going on, but they didn't make it in time and he was assassinated. So Q is the highest level of military intelligence. He describes it as like the reason it became QAnon is because it just sort of came this faceless, grassroots, intelligent gathering group. So Q, or QAnon, has been around all this time. And it was on, even on the internet, he said it was on several formats or several places until it caught on. And then people kind of started to build little groups off of it when they figured out. And he calls them patriots. So I will use that word because it is his word. So he says patriots are the people that are out there that are QAnon or call themselves QAnon, that are out to find the truth. He also uses the term white hats, which white hats are people that are, I guess, were initially in the deep state or something, and they are sort of clean and coming out now. So if you hear white hats, that's somebody that has come clean. They can be anything. They can be bankers that are turning it around and working for good. And he will get more into what they're trying to expose. It's not just something that is about, the sex rings and the pedophiles. It's actually about the state of the planet. They're talking about everything, whether it is, human trafficking or the banking system that has ripped everybody off, or anything, the environment. They're just talking about everything. Again, I apologize if this is choppy. So QAnon is about everything. The white hats are the people that used to be bad that are good now. And patriots are anyone that's working on this. So I know that word kind of has a weird, like Sean Hannity kind of ruined that word. So take it for what he means, which patriots are anybody that's looking for the truth. Probably if you listen to this podcast, you'll agree he talks a lot about how this is to go up against anybody that found a way to steal resources, whether it was China or whether it was a government or anything like that. So basically we're setting up that QAnon is kind of about what they want to free, or how they want to make life better, or how they want to make it, I almost want to say good for the little guy. Wars, stealing of natural resources, that kind of thing. They're really against, like, whatever, you can kind of say whatever's going on in the planet. He also talks about who sort of was, and we're saying deep state now, who was in control of starting this or what's going on. Because it's so big and vast what he's talking about, and he points right to the Vatican, first thing. Vatican was one that was in charge or starting this. And this is very interesting because I don't know if this was on my predictions show or something else, where I did hear that he talks about the Vatican, and that the Vatican has underground tunnels and things being found under there. I can't remember where I heard this. Maybe it was my own podcast, of everything that the Vatican is keeping underneath. He also says that all over in many cities, including, I know there's tunnels under LA. I know there's tunnels under Ogden, Utah. I know there's tunnels under Portland, Oregon. So he's right about this, that there's tunnels under just about every major city. And he says there are tunnels down there that they call dumbs, deep underground military bases. So it is these deep underground military bases where things are being stored, or kids are being trafficked, or whatever. And this is part of what is supposed to come out. He then goes to tell me about that there's a whole bunch of stuff under there. That would be where the child trafficking would go on. This would also be where military operations would go on that we wouldn't know about. And he starts to lean a little towards talking about other than humans, which I know here in LA, people are always talking about the underground tunnels in LA, and it's always a joke that the reptilian people live there, or something like that, or the hybrids live there, or some of this conspiracy that he's talking about lives there. And we've tried to get in a couple times, and I know my friend Alex has really tried to get in some ways that I wouldn't have, but so far no one has really gotten into the underground LA tunnels. And he talks about the beings that are down there, which, like I said, in LA they call them, I think they believe the reptilian people live down there. but he says to look up the word loosh, Loosh. So these are beings that live off an energetic frequency that we put out. It's fear, sadness. It sounds like it's all the negative ones, but that is what the underground tunnels are about. And that's that is a conspiracy or something that goes around LA quite often. They are considered aliens, or some of them are demonic. That's going to be another podcast that I did with Diet that you'll understand what that means. But it's just saying these underground beings, which have something to do with this military operation that live off of our emotions, are what are in these places. If you are a person that believes full disclosure is coming, this will not sound as crazy. Mostly beings that live somewhere between a 3D and 4D, and they're actually about chaos. They're more about causing chaos. And I asked, what is the plan at this point? Is it to go in and fight them? And he said, well, as with any military plan, the first thing is to expose them. He says that there are multiple light beings. Some of you might know the Galactic Council or the Orion Council that are here to help on this side. They have been assisting us, these light beings. Originally, there was a treaty where they were not allowed to assist us, but that treaty has been broken due to things happening, which again, this is very interesting. It's following along the same lines as the interview that will come out with Diet January 29th. The same theme of light beings to assist us or demonics having contracts being attached to humans. They came and broke their treaty when they realized that the other, shall we say, the reptilians or the demonics were getting so powerful that we needed help. So that would be your waking up of your Orion Council people, or Galactic, I forget the name, he just said it. And I ask about these beings and us. He says, well, if you go back and you look at it, we are basically babies here in the universe. And he was saying how we even had to repeat. We had to start again. We were Atlanteans and we screwed that up, and now we're starting again. So we're sort of the babies of the universe and being babysat, shall we say, by these other beings. Way to advance ourselves is through spiritual consciousness, through the we are all one type thinking, and everybody becoming, shall we say, woke, for lack of a better word. Where we're at now is to raise the frequency of the planet. Through the information release and through the arrests that are going to happen and all of the ones that have already happened, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to raise the frequency of the planet. As most of you know, some people will get this, some people won't. So the basics of QAnon is they're trying to move through the ascension, which actually we talk about quite a bit on this podcast. Also, Jessa Reed talks about that. So basically, QAnon is about a release of information, and they're trying to wake the public up. So they've been putting out for many, many years now little bits and pieces of information, and they have been saying to the public, you take this little bit of information that we've given you and you go investigate it yourself. So they were putting out little clues and just waiting, and as people became more woke, they became more in tune with QAnon. And then they say that people doing the investigating, they kind of calling them digital warriors or patriots that are finding on their own and collecting information. And through this, again, we're saying QAnon, Q is the highest level of security and intelligence. And then through these people doing their own investigating, he's saying some people became so good at it that the QAnon military intelligence started to say, we have to keep our eye on this guy, or we have to connect with him, or not keep an eye on him like they're learning too much, but like, hey, this guy or this girl is doing their work. One of these patriots is gathering that type of information, so we need to work with them or watch what they're doing in a good way. So again, just to repeat, because I'm doing this in such a broken way. So QAnon is supposed to be about exposing information, and their patriots are out there sort of combing the internet to find whatever information is out there to piece it together. Now, I am going to say I am just presenting this to you as he presented it to me, with no opinions and no break-ins. So I am not a QAnon or a patriot, but I do appreciate that he has given me this information and I can pass it on to you. When we get to the end, you will know why. So that's how QAnon is built, and that's sort of their agenda, to expose and put out information. Also, it's very interesting because it does show how the QAnon people, whether you want to call them crazy or not, they believe they're working for the good of the planet. So I asked him if QAnon is a non-violent group, if that's sort of, they're just a group of exposure and non-violent. And he simply goes in to talk about what I talked about in the beginning with the Antifas and such, which is there are some people that get anxious ahead of time. That's your Pizzagate. That's trying to shoot people at pizza place, that just get anxious. And he also takes responsibility that they, go into whatever, they become aggressive towards Antifa or Black Lives Matter or stuff like that. He talks a lot about those being infiltrated. He also was in a militia, and they knew when the FBI would many, many times try to infiltrate the militias with blackmail or with deals for people. So basically, it's kind of like, nothing is perfect. He also says that the Black Lives Matter movement got taken over. Okay, and I didn't ask too much about that, but I'm sure he means the worser part of the movement came forward. Perhaps the extremist people are running it now. He talks about how they're the bad eggs in there, you could say, or he refers to them more as anxious, the people that are getting anxious and want to move forward. Those are the ones where it's sort of fringing. He also says how everyone is in their place, sort of. Antifa is doing their part, Black Lives Matter is doing their part, and he doesn't exactly say it this way, but it's a little bit of chaos. There's a little bit of chaos everywhere, but everyone is causing what they should. I hope that makes sense. So he's saying that everyone's in their place to wake people up. So he again says Antifa on the bad side, or the Black Lives Matter, the ones that are on the bad side, and the other, everybody is sort of doing what they think they should to wake people up. So good or bad, chaos or whatever you want to call it, the whole point is to wake people up. And I'm just going to stop again to say Antifa is... and he and I talk about this. Antifa is not exactly a group. That's why the FBI can't track them. I know that there are factions of it. There are groups. There are groups of 2 people that are Antifa. There's groups of 50 that are Antifa. But they are not aligned as one. So if you are good Antifa, just ignore this when I say bad Antifa. I'm just using his words. So now we get to Trump, and I weigh in on my part, which is what I believe. This is one of the few times I put my opinion in, and you will hear his very different opinion. I think that Trump is the sort of the idiot that fell into this. Okay, they needed, this is again my theory, not his. They needed an anti-politician to disrupt. I remember an astrologer describing Donald Trump as the wrecking ball. He was to come in and wreck things. So I don't have him the same opinion as this gentleman, who I'll continue with. So now, as the whole QAnon team comes out, you'll see Q+. That is supposed to be Trump. So if you see a tweet or something from Q+, that is Trump. He says that any tweet or anything you see signed Q+ is Trump. And he goes to talk about Trump's family line, that he comes from a family of intelligent people. He says, imagine if you were taking on a cabal that was so big and so strong that it was every government on the planet. And you had to appear to be the dipshit. I think I got a little bit of his voice in there. I'm sorry. This is very hard. I hope it was only for a second. To throw your enemies off. So he is saying Trump is playing the fool. He admits that he knows he's a narcissist. He says, but he's a narcissist, but he gets things done. A lot of times they say when he was putting out either dumb information or misguided information, it was actually coded. Like during the whole coffee, remember it was supposed to be coffee or it was something else? That was actually represented, or that word was about a lawsuit that was going on by a former military person who was saying that 4G was incredibly dangerous. I don't know if he meant 5G and just said 4G, but that had my heart right there. The Covfefe was a lawsuit that was going on by a higher military that was saying how bad 4G, or again, I think he meant 5G, was for humans. And his mistakes are military coding. So certain things that are spelt wrong or capitalized are said to be coding. He says Donald Trump is not stupid. He has to play the part of stupid. So every president that comes in, it's a military operation. Just a question, is it the good guys coming in or is it the bad guys? And at this point, I said it was the only time I wanted to ask him a question, because I said, but Trump is a pedophile. And he said Trump is not a pedophile. And he said they have done every piece of research they can. He was a womanizer, but he wasn't a rapist or sexual assault or a pedophile. And we just left that as I will agree to disagree on that. Says he is one of the few people that never ever was compromised, and they try to find if he was, which is interesting because another version of that I think is no one cares. When Trump says admits to assault on Howard Stern, no one cares. So maybe that's a different way of saying it. But he says he's not a pedophile. So again, I agree to disagree with him on that. So where are we now and what is coming up in January? This is the part I wanted to get to. He says a lot of arrests have already taken place, but it has not been shown to the public firsthand. He's saying for right now, there have been arrests and things that have been done in the shadows because they can't bring that out yet. He says when some of the lower level arrests start, that is when it's going to be hard to hide it. And by lower level, he means actors or celebrities. When they start getting arrested, they won't be able to hide it anymore. It will be when they start disappearing or getting arrested that everything will start to kind of fall apart and get interested. He was saying how sometimes people just disappear. There's people that disappear. And I asked him who is doing the arresting, and he says it's the military. He also talks about how those that have been disappearing are going through tribunals. He says January 6th is going to be a very, very interesting day, and he said he'll be interested to see how many people show up to Congress that day, as though they know something's going down. And he says, I'll just leave it at that. And he talks about how the highest level of the military, the people that are arresting this, are not all human. Some of them are hybrids or reptilians or back to sort of that. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because when I hear about people disappearing in tribunals, I asked him, have we lost our freedom? And he said, well, what is freedom in your mind? Then I start with talking about the example of what I think is our freedoms being taken away, which is many, many things. But the example that I bring up to him is when people in Portland started getting grabbed by police officers or military people that had absolutely no identification and wouldn't identify themselves. So they came in as anonymous people and just started picking up protesters and throwing them in the back of the vans and taking them off. So taking them off somewhere where we didn't, most of them got returned, but I was like, isn't that a little unconstitutional or unfreedom-like? He says the people that were doing that, I asked him if they were of Qanon, and he said the people that were doing that were contractors. They were people contracted out by the military to do that. I guess maybe like a Blackwater type thing. Those guys can, sometimes they are working with police, he says, and they can kind of get dressed up in their garbage or in their garb and go out and snatch and grab people. This is what's happening in sort of the secret arrests or the arrests that are going on right now for the upper echelon. And then he makes a reference about the queen from the royal family disappearing that I wasn't aware of. Also, he refers back again to Antifa, that they have gotten into their message boards, or, it's almost like he's talking about a different Antifa than the one I know, because he's talking about they have message boards and they're more organized than I believe they are. But he is saying sometimes that snatch and grab has a lot to do with Antifa. So one thing we know is that QAnon has labeled Antifa the enemy. I refer back to the freedom question, which is when someone takes on that authority for themselves to be the one that decides who gets grabbed or who should be arrested or who should have a tribunal, that is when I'm asking him about freedom. Like, who is that? And what if somebody comes after me? They're just like, yeah, she's talking too much, let's throw her in. Or, there's always this example, which happens all the time. What if I have an ex-boyfriend who's like, yeah, she broke up with me and wants to have me tossed somewhere? There has to be some bad factions in QAnon or the military people doing this. And he starts to reference that he knows of people on, shall we say, his side or on the QAnon side who have just disappeared. In other words, sort of the reverse of what I was asking, that other places, that other government officials or people have just grabbed some of his friends or his people. Sort of not dodging the question, because as you know, when I talk to people, it tends to meander. But he says he's known people that have had attempts on their lives, and also that he's had 2 attempts on his life, which I'm assuming he means from the deep state. So sort of the interaction there was that it's both sides. Both sides are doing this to each other now already. Anyway, his answer was, because of light beings that are here now, people that are not doing anything wrong shouldn't worry. And that they're trying to do everything in their power to protect them. So it keeps striking me as odd as how much this goes just regular conspiracy, and then also the sort of the alien movement. Again, let me remind you, I'm keeping opinion out of this as much as possible because I'm just transferring his information to you. I ask him right out, by the end of January, will Trump be president again? And he says yes. We'll get his next 4 years. Earlier, he had said to me that everyone is just waiting to pull the trigger on this. I asked him what that means. He said how he had been putting on certain platforms and websites before the election started that there were things in place for the election to be stolen. He says if you look at the evidence in these swing states, there were thousands upon thousands of votes that were just pulled out of nowhere. Because the night of the election at about 9 o'clock, they realized that this was going to be a slam dunk for Trump. So the states got calls, most of the swing states got calls from Nancy Pelosi and people on the Democratic side to tell them to stop counting the vote. And at that point, they had their own plans to interject their own votes into this system. The voting machines are all compromised. They are run by the voting machines are run by the people in the government, and they have the ability to go in the back door and change the votes. He says China had some involvement with that as well. So he talked about the White House had this software. I guess you can look at this up somewhere. It's called Qanon software. They had that installed, as well as the deep state had their own installed. And he says many of the people in this were paid between $2 and $4 million to change the vote to Biden, and they haven't been paid yet. And of all the groups of the people that they offered that money to change the election, there were only 4 or 5 that did not take the money. So the Democrats tried to swing that by offering $2 to $4 million to people, and there were only about 4 or 5 people that were honest enough to say no. He says all of this is going to be revealed. And a lot of people are going to renege on that because they haven't gotten paid. And if Trump gets into the White House on January 6th, which is just a couple days away, they may go back on their deal if they haven't been paid. So the deep state is the group that wants to keep Biden in so they can keep cover of all this stuff. And it's not just pedophiles, it's the banking system or the way we sort of keep the 1% rich and the robbing of environmental stuff. So when I asked him about what's happening in January, I said, is all this going to go down in January, everything? And he said no. He said on the 6th, there will be a giant information dump. He says this will be the beginning of the healing on January 6th. Now, this is where it gets very interesting because he says later will be the bigger arrests. And you can see this because Trump and the military have bought court TV. So this is where you will see the trials. Or I should say he calls them tribunals, that you'll be able to pay for court TV if you want to see the tribunals of these pretty famous people being arrested. And he says as well as the executions. He says they've already executed quite an amount of people. Now here's where I get to the part that I think is the most important. I said on January 6th, if it doesn't go Trump's way, will QAnon and other people be out in the streets, out with guns, or out ready to commit violence? He says that the deep state is being dismantled right now, so he says groups like Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and he says the wrong, how do I say it again? The darker factions of these two, so the people that are just there for chaos, and active terror cells in this country, he said China has some, they are going to target our infrastructure. So this is something that isn't going to go away real quick. It's going to take a long time to unfold. He calls them speed bumps or says that it's going to be problems. So, in other words, no one really sees this going smoothly. I say, well, so we're probably not going to know who's who. And he said a lot of special forces have already identified these people through their communications. And that there are so many that it's not going to be easy to just round everybody up and take them away. And that's where he starts to talk about the same thing that I think, probably for different reasons, but he talks about how there's going to be some splits in the states. And this is the part where I find very interesting, and even if you rolled your eyes through the first part of it, this is the part that you need to know, because I do think he's talking for a large amount of people, that there will be a split in the state. And just putting in my opinion here, I don't see a win-win here, a win at all, because if Biden is put in, we've already heard from the Proud Boys who said they're going to go in and cause trouble, who we have not affiliated with QAnon. I didn't have that discussion with them, but I'm not putting those two together. But if Biden is put in office, and the astrology, I have to tell you, supports all of this. Inauguration Day is going to be a mess. And he is right. Almost what he's saying is almost completely astrologically aligned with there's a astrological reversal coming up of Trump getting in. There's an astrological talk about revealing truth. And there's also the 21st, which is said to have some of the worst astrological planet lineups ever. And I think, number one, it'll go, if Biden is in, the Proud Boys and whoever these groups are going to get active. And I also think if there's a reverse, the left is going to lose their mind. I'm with him on this, that this country has an implosion coming. So he says you're going to see things break off, and some places even become fully like communist run, which I think he's referring to more as the left, as it's more going to become a communist state. And then he says, and then you're going to have your other parts that are run by Trump. He says that's where we're heading. So I sort of ask him what's the answer here, and he says that for anyone, I said to him, so if everyone believes everything that you said, if there's somebody that's been nodding all through this, what should they have? And he says they should have water, medical supplies, food, that kind of stuff, which was kind of July, I was saying the same thing. He says if there's going to be a lockdown, it'll only be for a couple of months, and it will be because military action is taking place. He says that COVID has been used by the deep state to keep people under control and keep them out of the streets or sort of out of the way so that they could grab people. In other words, so that helicopters could land or military action could go in and they could grab people. He said the COVID restrictions are going to become a lot more prevalent in certain areas like Los Angeles. And he said how when the news puts out that the hospitals are so full that they're putting out military camp stuff in the parking lots and gift shops, that's not true. He says there's a lot of information out there to scare people and keep them home. Again, I always leave this out there. First responders, if you're losing your mind, please send me an email and I will read it on the air for you. So he says there's going to be some states where nothing is going on, because I asked him, I said, all right, so if I'm in Los Angeles and I see people out in the street in military, can I ask them if I can go to the store? And he said, well, it kind of looks like it's going to be going on in some states and not in others. So he says any Democrat-held state is going to have situations arise. So that says it's against the Democrats. And Democratic states are going to be the ones having the problems. As if the deep state tries to go after Trump, and he says how there's been many assassination attempts, it will come down to the Insurrection Act of 1807. I think he said, hang on, let me check that. Yes, the Insurrection Act of 1807 means if anyone makes an attempt at Trump, then he can bring the military in full acting out on the streets. In other words, turn against the country, have the military out full in the streets. He said it's going to be more like checkpoints. And I make the point of telling him it's already been like that. Sometimes, especially with the Black Lives Matter or with the George Floyd, you saw many people that just put on their military garb and went out and started stopping traffic. This is me, not him, but this is me thinking that was QAnon moving forward without the whole thing going on. So these were just people that dressed up and went out and started stopping people and directing traffic. He said there's people in the National Guard that if they get woken up in the middle of the night, within 2 hours, they would be in their military garb and could have a city locked down. He says it's best to prepare for the worst and then it'll just be fine. And that's how I feel, folks. This is not out here to scare you. He says during Obama's presidency, there were 2 attempts to arrest him and they were both foiled. I asked him if this is something that's going to be going on worldwide. This is where he says it's already been happening worldwide. This is when the white hats or the good ones can gain control of the NSA. When they already did gain the NSA. So he's saying the NSA is with the white hats now, it's good. And that they got a lot of information about alphabet agencies around the world, as well as the players that had been involved and the intel that had been gathered. They had everything. Now, he goes into an example about Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a deep state blackmailer. He would have people out to his ranch, they would videotape it, and then they had everyone with blackmail. Whether it was having sex with little children or murder, that's where Jeffrey Epstein, that's where almost all the blackmail came from. So a lot of information that's going to come out, it's going to be stuff like Jeffrey Epstein and a lot of other stuff that other countries have been doing. He says now it's almost like blackmailing everyone, like saying, hey, now you're going to come over here and play on Team Humanity with us, or we're going to expose everything. Expose you all and take you down if you don't do it now. That's where we are right now. We're in the process of being like, hey, we're going to expose everything if you don't start coming over here on, as actually like when he calls it Team Humanity. It's been going on for the last 3 years. And if everybody had been playing ball and came forward, we wouldn't have to go through what we're going through now. And I ask if there's going to be an internet, because I'm thinking if something like this is going down, we need a thing of communication. And he said they will take down social media so that there isn't misinformation there, but there seems to be some sort of a system put in or something so that you will have internet. So your porn is safe, people. I ask him, what is the end result? When is this over? And what does it look like when the world is done? And he says, peace. It's peace and a new form of government with many, I would say many more people involved. I think that's what he said. So he says it's more of a system that, and then this gets a little confusing to me. I apologize. I didn't ask it better at the thing at the time. But he said it's like when you become an American citizen, your parents sign your birth certificate. There's some sort of a system where if your parents don't sign it or you're not claimed in a matter of weeks, you become a ward of the state. Oddly enough, and I'm not quite following this, I apologize. If you are born here, nobody signs your birth certificate, they give you something 2 weeks or 30 days, but you're actually considered an enemy of the state if nobody claims you. Said this system has been in place for a very long time, and all of that kind of stuff is going to go away. I'm sorry, I think I needed more coffee at this point just because it didn't. I hope that whole last part there I transcribed made sense. So he says we're moving towards a multi-party system. Okay, so the point of QAnon is to release all this information and make sure everyone sees so we can start again from a point of clarity and freedom. And they didn't stop anything that was going on because the whole world has to be a witness to what's going on so that they can wake up. So I asked him because he and I had at one point discussed people who were stocking up on guns. And I said, what is that about? He says it's not about the movement or a movement. It's just about protecting what you have, staying home and protecting what you have in case things bleed over and get crazy. He's saying how some people are thinking they're getting ready to go out and fight in the streets, which is not a good idea because whoever QAnon or these people that are in place are highly trained and dangerous. And we use the example of Portland is already there, that Portland's already having these issues and it's still going on. He says when Trump gets reelected, some people are going to lose their minds, which I totally agree with. If that happens and this gets reversed, holy cow. Now we talk about the media. We talk about how basically most of the media is just reading the script they've been given. And that he says there are very much a lot of reporters out there that want to do good, that try to report these stories and are shut down. They're told if they report this, they'll be gone, and he means their lives will be ended. But we talk a bit about how he says Trump wanted to release a lot of information, and I always talk about how I want to hear Robert Kennedy speaking to the public on vaccines and then let everyone make their own decision from there since he's gone down the rabbit hole. And I told him the story of how Trump actually called Robert Kennedy and wanted to put him in charge of, I can't remember, it was a special panel or something to look into this, to investigate this. And he said yes. And then suddenly he never heard from Trump again, and his phone calls were never returned. And my QAnon friend here says that Trump was told no, and he was told not by people or the military, but by light beings that it's not time to put that out yet. I asked him about what media outlets would be, considered by him to be putting out the truth, and he said, he kind of says there's none right now. You have to dig. And he says how, whether it's on the light side or dark side, everybody's going to have their own agenda. So now when we jump back to how QAnon or Q, military intelligence, was actually started by John F. Kennedy, that explains the QAnon theory that John Jr. is coming back. And he also says how his father was murdered by George Bush Sr. So he says Herbert Bush, the older Bush, used the CIA to murder JFK. And that when at older Bush's funeral, there was video of envelopes being passed out, which was basically John Jr. saying, hey, I'm here. I don't mean that in a friendly way. I asked him when JFK will be coming out, and he says not yet, because even Trump is right now surrounded by people he can't trust. And he says, because I was saying to him, I said, well, if they can produce JFK or Jr., then the whole world would go, hey, wait, what? And he said that at Trump's second inaugural, which he's assuming is, well, he just said second inaugural. Actually, he didn't say it was the one coming up. He said you're going to be amazed at who shows up to the to it, that it'll be people that we previously thought were dead. And so when we end and I ask him advice, some of it was, if you see this going on, avoid it. Don't go out and think you're going to take on the military or any of these people. And the second thing was, oddly enough, like most of us, just focus to bring in light and hope for the best. He talks a lot about galactic beings in this, and bringing in light. So there it is, folks. Now, again, this was me transcribing what he told me, and I was trying to go in with I wasn't going in with bias or asking, going up against him or disagreeing. This podcast was just to tell you what is being thought of on that side of QAnon. That is what they believe. You are absolutely welcome to whatever, and don't write mad at me if you don't like it, because like I said, I was just transcribing what he told me. The beautiful thing about this podcast is January 6th is literally days away, and the inaugural is within a month. So there you go. And there's your information about QAnon directly from them. So do with it what you will. Okay. You also I can't tell you how long it took me to transcribe. I will never do that again, because I was like, I didn't want his voice on here, because he was kind enough to do that. And man, took me 2 hours. Okay, everybody, have a great day. We'll see you on Friday. Again, not me transcribing QAnon, someone from QAnon, or close enough, what is going down and what they expect. So, all right. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks.